For those who have watched my Evil Spider-Man video, they will know that people occasionally have claimed to have encountered a spindly being that reminded them of the black-suited Spider-Man. I recently came across another Spider-Man story that, while different, is certainly intriguing. This specific case occurred in 1982 somewhere in Washington state, but from what I can gather is still occurring to this day. The author did not wish to disclose the exact location out of respect for the family of the deceased. The witness claims that at the time of the incident, she was only around 5 years of age. She and her mother were visiting her grandmother on the reservation where she lived. While her mother and grandmother were inside the house making lunch, the girl decided to remain in the back room and play with her toys. Before long, she began to notice something strange going on in the backyard. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something fluttering on top of a tall cinder block wall outside that divided the housing. I paid no mind and continued to play with my toys. Then, all of a sudden, I see two red gloves reaching up from behind this very tall cement wall. I stood up and walked to the sliding glass door to get a better look, when all of a sudden, Spider-Man, like the comic book, red and blue tight suit, mask covering the whole head and face, began to crawl over the wall very slithery and slow like a snake. Stunned, the witness felt compelled to greet the entity. I remember being curious and walking towards the back door as if I was going to greet him, when all of a sudden I froze. I couldn't move or speak. The figure came closer to the window and put both hands on it and stood there with its head leaning to one side like a dog does. I tried to scream, but nothing would come out. Finally, my body let out some noise, but it was just a squeak. I tried to scream again. Just then my grandma came back to check on me. She said my name and I was silent, standing there pointing to the window with tears rolling down my face. She asked me what I saw, and all I could keep saying was Spider-Man over and over. At this point the grandmother screamed for the mother. Together they brought her inside the kitchen and calmed her down. I remember the look on both their faces. They were scared but kept telling me I imagined it. The woman claims that years later, when she was 16, she was at her grandmother's house again. She had never forgotten what had happened and decided to ask her grandmother about the day she saw Spider-Man. To the woman's surprise, the grandmother told her that she had something to tell her. She said 2 years before I was born, there was a young man on the res that had what we believe now was autism. He was harmless and everyone knew him. One day my granny was at a yard sale and the young man kept picking up an old Spider-Man Halloween costume. She noticed his fascination, so she bought him the costume. He put it on and began running around the res, acting like he was Spider-Man. He never took the costume off. In fact, he lived in it till the day he died. The grandmother explained that this young man had run out in the road one night and was struck and killed by a truck. He was wearing the Spider-Man suit when he passed away. Following this, young people living on the reservation began seeing what they believed was the ghost of this boy, always dressed in his Spider-Man costume. She believes that this is what her granddaughter saw that day. For some reason, it seems he'd come to play with her. Interestingly, the witness claims that since she told her story, she has heard from numerous other people who claim that they too have encountered this Spider-Man ghost on the reservation. One aspect of this case that I really find intriguing is the way the witness claims she felt drawn to the figure as it slithered down the wall. One would think she would run away in horror at such a bizarre sight. However, in her case, she felt the need to walk towards it. And then, as she approached it, she found herself in a somewhat paralyzed state, unable to move or scream. This feeling of being paralyzed is described in numerous alien encounter stories, as witnesses report being frozen in place upon encountering alien entities. This is also described by people who experience sleep paralysis. However, I do not believe that sleep paralysis applies here, as the witness claims she was wide awake. Nor do I believe that it was aliens. Curiously, the witness does not indicate how the entity departed after the grandmother came back to check on her. Had it simply vanished, or had it quickly scooted back around the house? Had she omitted that detail on purpose, or did she simply not remember? I do not know of many ghost stories in which the witness is described feeling paralyzed, although I am no expert in ghost stories, so it's possible that it happens more than I realize. In the end, it's a very weird case. David Paulides, author of the Missing 411 books, often speaks of cases in which people hiking in the woods will turn around and discover that, although they were right behind them on the trail, sometimes only a few feet away, the person whom they were hiking with has suddenly disappeared. In many instances, they are never heard from again. In May 2004, a person hiking with their friend in Algonquin Park in Ontario, Canada, had a very bizarre experience, one that sounds similar to the cases David discusses, but from the point of view of the person who disappeared. This case appeared in the Fortean Times and is certainly bizarre. A woman claims that she was walking on the Mizzy Lake Trail with her friend Lisa in May 2004. The Mizzy Lake Trail is an 11-kilometer walk through the forest and wetlands, which is designed to bring a hiker in proximity to some of the local wildlife. These shorter trails in Algonquin are easy to follow, as every few meters there is a blue disc nailed to a tree to show the way and keep people on the path. The woman recalled that about halfway down the trail, she and Lisa began arguing. They ended up walking separately. The witness was in front, Lisa was behind her. She would periodically look back to make sure that Lisa was at least staying close. As they approached a section at the northeast corner of one of the small lakes on the trail, March Hare Lake, the witness stopped to check behind her again. She was there, but the situation would quickly veer into the bizarre. There she was, about 10-15 meters behind me on the path. I turned around and carried on, stopping after a few more steps at a bend to wait for her. Suddenly I heard this weird noise from the direction I had last seen her in. When she didn't appear on the path, I retraced my footsteps along the path, thinking that perhaps the noise was some animal coming through the trees and she'd stop to look at it. But she wasn't there. She should have been easy to spot, wearing a bright white t-shirt and light-colored trousers, but I couldn't see her anywhere. "Lisa," I said, "where are you?" There was no reply. I tried again, a little louder this time. "Lisa." Thinking she was probably hiding to teach me a lesson for going on in front, I started to get a bit agitated. "Lisa," I shouted, "if you're hiding, you can come out now." Still no response. "Okay, it's not really very funny now. Where are you?" There was nothing but the sound of a few birds and the creaking of a tree in the light breeze. I started to panic. "Lisa, please, where are you?" Still nothing. The witness claims she began to yell her friend's name at the top of her lungs, so much so that it echoed across the lake. Still there was no answer. Just then, the witness began to worry that maybe Lisa had been attacked by a bear and didn't have enough time to scream or call for help, although she did find it odd that she didn't hear any commotion. Panicking like crazy, and with her nowhere in sight, I frantically ran backwards and forwards for a couple minutes along the path, literally screaming her name and yelling for help, but all was completely in vain. I was resolved to having to call 911 and to be looking for a body. It was a horrible, horrible feeling. Sadly, the witness's cell phone in her backpack was dead. She was forced to run back to the highway 5 kilometers away and call from a payphone at the car park. So off I ran, falling over tree roots and through streams. After about 2 kilometers, I started shouting her name again, and from some way in the distance I heard a response. Not sure whether or not it was her, I carried on running and shouting until I could ascertain that it was her. I shouted at her to stay put, and I'm sorry to say, when I turned a corner, she was standing there in front of me. I fell on her with tears in my eyes. "Where have you been?" she asked. This is where it gets weird. She had stuck to the path as well, but she had not passed me. In fact, she was convinced that I was still way ahead and was angry with me for not waiting for her. She had not heard me shouting until I had almost caught up with her, despite my screaming earlier at the original location at the top of my lungs. The witness was stunned. How had she got so far ahead in such a short space of time, she wondered. Further, how did she get around her without her either seeing or hearing her? We discussed the routes we had walked, and they were identical, basically along the edge of the lake. There were no shortcuts. I had to run to catch up to her. If she had passed me where I stood waiting for her at the bend, even given the time I was shouting for her originally, I would have caught up sooner. She doesn't walk particularly fast, and given my panicky state, I was moving pretty quickly despite the tumbles I took. So what happened? For me, it sounds like Lisa was walking along the trail and the witness had, for a very short time, vanished. Hence the reason why Lisa was able to pass her on the trail, get so far ahead, and not hear her frantic screams for help. The reason she did not hear her was because she wasn't there. On the other hand, the strange sound heard by the witness might indicate that Lisa was taken and then brought back further up the trail. Maybe one of them slipped into a type of dimensional doorway, which took them further ahead in time or to another place altogether. Overall, it's a very weird case. If this case is true, it definitely suggests that something very strange is happening in our world's forests.